So I just want to do a little exercise, also because it's the end of the day. If everybody could just stand up for a second. Really, there's big lights here. I can't say hi, everybody. There we go. Cool. So stay standing if you think that we're in a bit of trouble from an environment, climate, and planet perspective. Sit down if you think it's all good. Great. So stand up keep standing if you don't feel like you're really making a significant difference, if your little actions aren't really making enough of an impact. Cool, got a couple of people who think they're doing some good stuff. That's great. Stay standing if you think that companies or organizations can, companies specifically for profit, can have a positive impact on the planet and the environment. Great, so pretty much everybody. Now, stay standing if you think your company is already making some decent amount of positive impact. Cool. Not cool, but cool. It's like 70% of people sat down. That's an opportunity, I hope. And stay standing if you personally, in the organizations that are left there, you're in some interesting, cool companies, if you personally feel like you're enabled to make a positive impact on the environment through the company somehow, whether it's directly through your role or indirectly through the organization. Great, mostly. Some not, cool. And then stay standing finally if environmental impact and consciousness in the business is at the core and the heart of the organization. The reason that they exist, it's in the constitution or it's in the kind of ethos of everything you do every day. That's really cool. Everyone should go talk to these people who are still standing because they work at some pretty awesome companies and that's pretty inspiring to see. I guess the discussion for today is really about trying to get more of those people who sat down earlier, who thought there's a potential for business to leave a better world, and make some changes in their company. So yeah, sorry, take a seat. Thanks. You can keep standing if you want. So of course, governments, NGOs, activists, there's a whole ecosystem of organizations and individuals that need to make a difference to solve these problems. But we really want to tackle business and how business can play a role in a practical way, assuming that we all accept that that's necessary. Theoretically, businesses can have the greatest impact because they are the ones that are consuming the most amount of resource, creating the most destruction, and producing the most waste because we all buy stuff from them, whether it's energy, clothes, or whatever. So hopefully, if we can all change some businesses, we can have a big impact. We also assume that this is not a question of profit versus impact. We're past that. That's old news, that's boring. Businesses can make profit and they can make the world a better place, including some that are talking about up today. Today each of the three panelists are tackling the environment using business from a different perspective. First, in fashion, we've got someone who is in a business that is trying to undo effectively one of the most damaging industries in the world. We've got a business who's working in developing markets in Cambodia and Bangladesh who is creating a product which actually regenerates the environment while providing commercial and economic gain. And then third is a new business that's been in development and piloting for a couple of years, which is trying to change consumers' behaviour. So change what we buy and buy from better businesses, hopefully use less stuff. So I'll introduce the first person, which is from Patagonia. If you're not aware of them, I'm a bit of a fan. As you can see, I didn't wear my hat today because I thought that would be a bit over the top. Patagonia is an outdoor clothing brand. They actually started as a traditional business many years ago, just making apparel like any other one. But they made a conscious decision to bake environmental impact into their business, which made some really hard changes to the way that they operate. And 20 years on, they're just leading the way and killing it. They have it baked into everything they do, the supply chain, their culture, the way they hire, the way they manage energy, and you'll hear about some of that today. So Shannon, if you want to come up. Shannon has been in her dream job at Patagonia for 4.5 years as the Environmental and Social Initiatives Manager at Patagonia. Sweet gig, doing some really cool stuff for a great company. She manages their grants, campaigns, social environmental responsibility programs. And we'll talk to her about those grants, regenerative farming and cotton, and how being a B Corp affects their business. Also about how you're getting to renewable energy 100% pretty soon.
Yeah, very, very soon.
Shannon has a healer Kelpie cross called Margaret, and she goes to the office every day because apparently she will run away from home if she's left at home.
It's out of necessity, not because I want her to be there. She jumps the fence, so yeah.
I'm sure she's lovely. So next up we have ATEC International, probably a business you haven't heard of. They're a 5-year-old Australian social enterprise operating primarily in Cambodia, and soon in Bangladesh. They provide renewable energy and the technology called a biodigester. Put your hand up if you've heard of a biodigester before. Hey, awesome. Couple. I'd never heard of it before, but it's a really simple technology where you put in organic matter, like cow poo primarily, and it produces organic fertilizer and gas that can be used for anything, primarily in this case, cooking. So it helps farmers in Cambodia really change their economic situation, improve the environment, and reduce some harmful things that are happening otherwise. So they've got 1,400 customers in Cambodia, farmers that are paying for this product as a for-profit business. Thank you for changing the slides. Forgot about that. And they're scaling, like I said, going to Bangladesh. And we'll hear about how impact is baked into everything that they do, including the way they've raised money from investors and grants. Ben's not a dog person, we just found out, but his daughter is making him a dog person, getting one for her birthday in April. So he needs to build a fence for the new dog. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers. And finally, we have the Neighbourhood effect. So this is that consumer behaviour change app that has been worked on for a couple of years now with pilots with Canberra and Sydney and some other councils. They use behaviour science and environmental science to make local green living easy. So think like a fitness app for the environment, for the planet. They're basically breaking down the climate crisis into really simple, actionable steps that can empower you and hopefully encourage you to kind of get some stuff done and not just feel a bit overwhelmed like I was previously. I was accepting that we were in a state of crisis and I personally needed to change my behaviour but didn't really know what to do. When working with Lily on the app, we did some work together. I got really inspired about the small things that I can do that will make a big difference. And over the last year or so, have done a whole lot of changes to the way that we bank, the energy we use, the way we don't use Tupperware, use Tupperware and not throw away stuff. So made a lot of changes. And founder Lily is a bit of a force of nature. I love working with her. She's worked in, she's worked in policy at Prime Minister and Cabinet. She's also been a market impact director at GetUp, where she ran a campaign that got 18,000 people to change to green or renewable energy. She's going to share how potential impact of behaviour change on the environment, and some tips on what we can all do. Lily. Yeah. Hey. So, yes, slide click. Cool. So just to give everyone a bit of where you're at in your business, just give us a high-level summary of the business, where you're at, size, number of customers, countries, how many staff, that kind of thing. Lily, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So we're an early stage startup, just raised sort of pre-seed investment, have 4 staff, and we're launching our flagship mobile app in April after 2 years of a lot of prototyping and pilots with Sydney Council and with the ATEC government.
Hi, everyone. So we're sort of moving from a startup to a scale-up phase. We have about 1,400 customers in Cambodia, plus demonstration units in 8 countries. We just did a US $1.6 million equity investment round at the end of last year to roll out a new payment technology so farmers can use mobile money to pay off the biodigester over time, as well as expand to Bangladesh. And we're at about 45 staff.
We opened our first store in Torquay in 2009, and we've got stores all around the world in Europe, Asia Pacific, Japan, America. We now have 8 stores here in Australia. Our HQ is based down in Torquay as well, and we're in 360 stockists.
Awesome, thanks. So before we get into business, love to hear from each of you where you personally feel like the biggest challenge is environmentally. What keeps you up at night? What's most upsetting about the world, where we're at? Ben, would you like to go first?
Oh, okay.
This is so fun.
Heavy.
Well, I mean, I'm going to play to my wheelhouse here a little bit. So to me, it's a problem or a challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity, and we have a huge potential for waste to energy in green waste, animal waste, all kinds of human waste, etc. And most of the areas in the world, we currently treat that as a waste product that needs to be disposed of. And there's both huge potential in converting that into energy, and then also our soils are actually in pretty dire straits globally as well. We're forecast to run out of topsoil in 60 years. So we need to start regenerating the soils by taking all this waste that we're currently dumping and utilising it back into households. So particularly in developing countries, you look at their waste, it can be up to 70-80% of their daily waste is actually organic waste. And I'm not sure of the number in the West, but yeah. It's a lot that could be used.
Cool. Really?
If you're really interested in this book called Drawdown, Project Drawdown is really good for sort of categorizing all of the things that need to happen and their relative impact for us to stay below 2 degrees of global warming. From my perspective, there's so much that's happened technologically in the last 10 years. You know, the economic feasibility of environmental sustainability is like really shifted because of resource efficiency and the ability to repurpose waste streams. You know, the cost of clean energy has massively come down. You know, it can compete economically with fossil fuels now. So I think, you know, the biggest obstacles are really at national government level, the policy intransigence in countries in the West, like the US and Australia, and also just the level of redesign required in our manufacturing systems, and also, you know, consumer behaviour change. We're all still buying a lot of stuff that we don't really need and are pretty inefficient in the way we use our resources, particularly in the West. You know, we have really high per capita, which is per person, carbon footprints, generate a lot of waste, consume a lot of energy. So that needs to change, along with our diets.
Easy.
It's possible.
Yay.
I had waste as well. I take my hat off to anybody that's mastered that zero waste lifestyle. I certainly haven't yet. And I don't think many businesses have either. I don't think we've seen the level of investment required to address the scale of that problem yet. And so I'm really hoping to see things shift over the next couple of years.
Cool. So now just thinking about business and making a business have a positive impact on the world from an environmental perspective, do any of you see there's a trade-off where you have to compromise on profit or on operations or quality of service to customers, or is it actually the other way? Or yeah, what's your view? Do you want to go first?
Our founders, Melinda and Yvonne Chenard, have always approached Patagonia as a bit of an experiment, and they really saw it as an attempt to try and demonstrate to the business community that making environmentally and socially responsible decisions could make for good business sense as well. And they've been able to demonstrate that so far. So we haven't really seen that trade-off.
Cool.
It can be a tricky one, particularly for us. We were a startup with very strong social and environmental goals. And then for us, we're working with last mile farmers who are very income poor, and it's actually been a process of actually increasing our price over time, because we actually started too low with our pricing, but really adding in the value as you go through that as well.
What do you mean? Why was it too low?
Well, because number one, the target we were working with, and number two, we were predominantly looking at the impact rather than the profitability of the business. We costed our costs in substantially too low, effectively. So it then created a problem where we were constantly cash poor, trying to solve it, and then we realised, actually, the farmers are generating so much value out of the systems that they can actually pay more, which then balances out us being more sustainable to serve them better as well. So trying to get that balance right is tricky.
And changing the price now, have you seen the benefits of that financially?
Yeah, well, it means that we're able to cover our costs much more effectively, as well as provide better service to customers, provide more flexibility, etc. So
okay, yeah.
So if you think about some of the most successful companies, modern companies, a lot of them are collaborative consumption companies. Uber, Airbnb, they're good examples where they've made better use of existing resources, the car in Uber's case, and people's homes, and they're just kind of vacant, sitting unused, and they've unlocked a huge amount of value from those poorly utilised resources. So there's huge profitability in greater resource efficiency, and a big part of environmental sustainability is about using resources more efficiently. So I don't think that there's any conflict between profitability and sustainability, although certainly, when you look at companies and how they're legally structured in Australia and elsewhere, you have a fiduciary duty to maximise shareholder value. And in an economy where a lot of the environmental degradation that occurs, that's externalized, it's not a cost that the company wears, you're going to have decisions that are kind of pushing counter to good environmental practice because it does maximize profit. So there are some big issues in terms of how we're structured economically and how companies are structured legally and the incentives that creates. But if your purpose is to increase resource efficiency or your focus is really on creating some positive environmental benefit, absolutely it's possible to be very profitable.
Great. So now we want to dive into a couple of little topics. So around consumption, how people consume, consumers' awareness of businesses' impact, structure in organisations, farming and production, and then finally energy before we wrap up. So Shannon, one of the things that Patagonia does is a program called Warnwear. And one of the parts of it that I find really interesting was that keeping your clothes an extra 9 months can reduce your carbon, water and waste footprint by 20 to 30%.
Yep.
Can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, so the OneWare program has been around for a while, and it's based on this sort of circular economy model where we try and keep our products in play for as long as possible. And that really starts in the design phase. We try and design them with repairability and durability in mind. We repair them when they're broken, free of charge. We recover them once they're beyond repair, and then we repurpose those materials at the end of their life. Globally, we've invested in a vast array of initiatives under this sort of Warnwear banner. Some of those are repair hubs at our stores. We have one of the largest repair centres in North America, which is based at our distribution centre in Nevada. We have Warnwear pop-up stores where we're selling repaired gear. We have an online digital platform that sells used Patagonia goods. We are currently trialling a rental program for our ski and alpine gear as well. And I think either this year or next year, we will be launching a premium Patagonia line that's made from recovered materials that we've found through our repair centres as well. In Australia, I think this year we're really focusing on expanding that Warnwear offering for the Australian market. We recognise that as we sell more and more products, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are offering those services for repair and recovery to the Australian market as well. So that's going to be a really big focus for us this year.
Is it currently available or?
Yeah, we have a repair hub at our Sydney store, and we also have third-party repair partnerships. So we'll still take back any broken Patagonia item and repair it free of charge.
So if this t-shirt, for example, got broken,
Yep.
I could just bring it to one of those locations, and how would it work? And is there any questions? Or?
You can call up our customer service and they'll help you out, or you can bring it into one of our stores and they'll make sure that the t-shirt comes back to us. We evaluate it and assess it. If it can be repaired, it will go through that stream. If it is beyond repair, it'll go to our Warnwear hub and we'll either repurpose the materials or it'll go to recycling. There is an interesting conversation that happens with customers. Some customers bring back a t-shirt or a shirt, and instead of, when we do offer the repair services, they ask for a replacement instead. And so we are seeing that there is a conversation and behaviour change piece that goes along with this Warnwear program.
Fascinating. Lily, from taking that a bit broader, so that's talking about changing the way that we reuse and recycle clothes. What are some of the other things that consumers can do and we as individuals that can have the greatest impact, maybe the top three?
Yeah, so one of the single most impactful things you can do if you're concerned about the climate crisis and want to reduce your personal carbon footprint is to make changes to your diet. So the World Health Organization's daily recommended intake of meat is 90 grams, which is basically just using meat for seasoning. It's not, at every meal. And so, yeah, if you're passionate about this or curious, you don't need to go full vegan or even full vegetarian, just learning a couple of recipes that you like, curries, stir fries, with a lot of fresh veggies, seeds, legumes, learning how to make plant-based meals, and subbing them into your routine. That's a really effective thing that you can do if you want to reduce your carbon footprint. So that's number one. Number two, it's kind of where you'd expect it to be in energy usage. So if you can afford it, there's a scheme called Green Power. It's available to everybody, including renters, through almost all electricity retail companies. You can switch your energy over to Green Power. It's a national and state scheme, and the emissions associated with your energy usage basically get offset by adding more renewable energy into the grid, equivalent to the amount that you consume. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is really, try to cycle more, walk more, reduce your car usage. I'm going to put number 4 in. I can't help myself. Also, just buy less stuff. Buy stuff secondhand. If you need to have a product that you're not going to use very often, ask your friends if you can borrow it. There are great Facebook groups, really, really active in Melbourne, Buy Nothing and Good Karma Network in most suburbs, where you can just share stuff with your neighbours for free, which is fantastic.
Or take your Patagonia t-shirt back and get it repaired.
Yeah, or go to Patagonia and be like, fix my t-shirt.
Do you fix anyone's
I
t-shirts
definitely
or
do
just
that.
yours?
No, lots of people.
So maybe just following on from that, Lily, do you think many people understand the impact of their purchasing choices, like the negative impact that business has?
It's really hard, right? Like there's a lot of what's called greenwashing now. There's huge consumer demand for more ethically produced products, both in terms of labour standards and environmental credentials. And so you see, this prevalence of like leaves and forest and green stuff all over brands, and it's natural. And it's really, really hard for consumers without better certification schemes and regulations. Like there's tons that if you get across it, like, Forest Stewardship Council, B Corp certification, there's like a bunch, but you really have to educate yourself. It's not an easy kind of, I'm comparing this product and this one and I can see the environmental impact, on the bottle. So people absolutely care. There's a study, it's been running for like over a decade, that's placed like what you call eco-conscious consumers, people who are trying to purchase environmentally kind of friendly products. That consumer segment's going to be a third of the whole consumer market in Australia by 2025. So there's massive demand for environmentally friendly products, but it is really hard to discern at the moment what's legit and what's not.
Yeah, was at an event recently about meat-free diets, and the question was asked, which of all these marks do I listen to? There's all these trust marks and stamps, and that's more confusing now. And the comment from the panelists was it's better if they have some of them than if they don't, if you can't spend time learning about them. How does that sound?
Yeah, I mean, there are increasingly, services that are working to make these decisions much easier for people. The app that my organisation's releasing in April is one such example. Good on you. They've been around for a while. They're an ethical fashion app. They're rating brands on their environmental credentials and labour standards and animal cruelty sort of standards. So
Yeah, cool. Shannon, with Patagonia, I've heard that some different stats about it, but up to 70% of your customers don't actually fully understand the environmental impact that you're having. I'm not sure if that's true, but yeah, have you heard of that?
I haven't heard that stat. I think it varies, particularly between the Australian market and the North American market. They've got such a strong brand heritage there of 30 or 40 years, whereas here in Australia, we're still a relatively new brand to the retail market and the outdoor space as well. And people come at our brands from different angles. People might just want a new wetsuit or a down jacket, and so that's their first entry point into us talking to them about recycled down or Ulex wetsuits or something. But then other people might come to us through our grants program, for instance. Maybe they support a grantee and they've realised that we are one of their funders. And so there's a range of different entry points to Patagonia for a lot of our customers. And so evaluating how aware people are of sort of the environmental and social programs that we implement is really difficult for us to tell.
Yeah. And Ben, in the farming communities and the farmers that are buying your products, how much of a role does the environmental impact play in their decision versus the other benefits you talked about?
Yeah, well, we've got an interesting product in that there's a range of benefits. There's some income and time. Most people don't know that if you collect wood every day and compare that to clean cooking, like with biogas or something else, you save about 20 hours per week. So that's like half a working week. Predominantly the woman of the house can then use to increase her income, spend more time with the kids, do whatever she wants with that time. So that tends to be the really key driver, is around increasing time, making life easier, improving the farming through using the fertiliser. But there is a big awareness around the environmental side, but more on a localised way. And it's people are actually surprisingly cognizant of climate change in Cambodia. It's talked about a lot, and it's not a debate. Everyone's like, yes, it's happening and it'll affect us quite strongly. which is quite interesting. But then it's more about the concern around the forests and the what's happening in the local forests and the fact that there's no wood anymore, etc. That tends to be more of the reason.
And is there also a direct impact they feel from the water and the soil degradation and the quality of the soil from chemical fertilizers and stuff? So do they feel it more directly, or is that a different...
Yeah, so the climate change is more linked to I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to grow rice or my vegetables or whatever anymore is generally more the concern. So.
Great. So now, yeah, I mean, just going more broadly, if a bunch of us consumers, us in the world, use Neighbourhood Effect or buy better products, use Biodigesters, what sort of scale of impact can happen really if a whole bunch of people use your app, and how many before things start turning around?
Yeah, so I think the thing to keep in mind with climate change is it's a complex network problem. Everybody's contributing a little bit and no one has total control over solving the problem. But we can have pretty rapid and tangible impacts collectively, even just with a couple of tens of thousands of people. That's the campaign I ran at GetUp sort of demonstrated that. We had the carbon emissions impact of taking 50,000 cars off the road with like 14,000 people in one campaign just switching their electricity retailer online, and that took about 5 minutes per person. With the Neighbourhood Effect, if you look at, say if we had an app user base of the same as Fitbit and people got a third of the way through our carbon emission reduction programs, that's the equivalent of shutting down like 40 coal-fired power stations. And even if it was just 50,000 people, again, like getting like a quarter of the way through our programs, that's the same as running 50 wind turbines for a year. So, it's small numbers of people actually. If you make concrete changes in your own life, you reduce your energy usage, your waste generation, the embodied emissions in the products you buy, then you can have, and changes to your diet, so to your food carbon footprint, you can have a pretty significant impact collectively, pretty quickly.
Awesome. So maybe we'll now move to business structure and operations and how you run organisations. So Ben, you've said that, you're a social enterprise and a development business, but how is ATEC set up or structured differently, or what governs your kind of approach to environment?
Yeah, we're a little bit weird in multiple ways, but on the business structure is, so we were originally founded by two not-for-profits, two charities, Engineers Without Borders and Live and Learn, and we tried to figure out, well, how can we best structure this? So what we decided was to create a proprietary limited company, a private company with shareholders, and then those two not-for-profits became the two founding shareholders of that company. Then we wrote up our shareholders agreement, which is like your constitution, and in that we put in first and foremost like sort of eight core sort of impact statements that we wanted to make through doing the business there.
Can you give an example?
So that's like around, we'll always prioritise the sort of the impact of the profits, and that we'll always look to reduce waste wherever we can during the supply chain, etc. A bunch of different stuff. So that's kind of in our shareholders agreement. The challenge in Australia though is, so say we're hugely successful and one day someone buys us out, they can easily just go change that and turn us into a for-profit entity with the way business structures currently are in Australia. So there's no, if you're a company that wants to raise financing through equity and rather than just going the grant route, which we decided was the best way for us, there's no legal way to lock that in right now. Unlike the UK, which has a social enterprise business structure where you can lock that in more, and then B Corp in the US, I'm not as familiar.
Benefit company?
Benefit Corp.
Benefit Corp company?
Yep. Yeah, benefit company, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, in certain states in the US, I think that's now, you're locking it in as such. But like you mentioned before, the fiduciary duty thing, if someone bought us out, even if they had good intentions to start, they could quickly change the shareholders agreement and just go full crazy on profit if that's what they wanted to do.
And what does having those things in the business today do to your day-to-day decisions, or does it affect you and how you operate?
Yeah, but particularly around the strategic side of why we decide to do certain things. And at the end of the day, we're there, our primary role is to help these farming communities be more productive and have less sort of backbreaking work that they need to do every day. So we're constantly viewing the decision in that way of how we can best support farmers in that way.
And does it affect how you capital raise? So certain investors just wouldn't be interested, for example?
Yeah, so our last round, we had 4 investors in the round, and they're all what they call impact investors, so people who look at the social, environmental, and financial returns. And that's a big discussion point in its own, because you have some people who it's like a tick box exercise for the social and environmental, and some people who it's like that's the core decision, and then the financial return is kind of a bit of a bonus. So there's a whole range. So we were tending more towards that end, given that we're a very high impact technology.
Can you just give us an example of one of those organisations?
So I'll give a couple. One is Engie, which is a French utility company, one of the biggest utility companies in the world. I think they're about 60 billion per year. But they've put in place a new strategy to become fully green over the next, it started about 5 years ago, so about 20 years. Which is a huge company and a huge transition. But they then have an impact investment fund that they then invest in green startups as well. And then the other, which some people know here, is Small Giants, based out of Melbourne, which has been kind of a trailblazer in impact investment for many years.
Yeah, cool. So Lily, earlier you mentioned, the B Corp as a concept, and Patagonia was one of the first, I believe, to be a B Corp?
Yeah, in 2012. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So for those unfamiliar with B Corp, the B stands for benefit, and it's a certification standard for businesses that want to create benefit for their stakeholders, not just their shareholders. And so a business's stakeholders might include their employees, their customers, the communities that they work in, and the environment as well. And to certify as a B Corp, you have to score more than 80 out of 200 in a test. And it's actually really difficult to achieve that standard. But I think what it does is provide businesses with a model to first of all measure their impact, then to set a really clear pathway for change and value creation. And it allows you to have those conversations internally with your team as well, which I also think is really important. And then you can also share what you learn with the B Corp community. And I think, it just allows for that more disruptive sort of agenda to be set within business.
Yeah, does it affect your day-to-day job or the way that Patagonia Australia operates, or?
Yeah, it does. I mean, we're a legally recognised benefit corporation within US legislation as well as being a B Corp, a certified B Corp. And so every couple of years you have to go through an audit process as well. And so there's a constant checking in with a lot of the processes and systems that you've set in place to ensure that you're constantly creating that benefit and that value for each of your stakeholder groups.
Yeah, cool. We're going through the process ourselves as a little 2-person business. I recommend you do it. Even if you don't go to become be fully certified, you learn a lot about how to run a business, actually, just a whole bunch of stuff you should do, and then also a whole bunch of ideas of how you can improve your impact, like how you dispose of batteries, your energy provider, open policies that your customers can see. It's really interesting. So check it out. So maybe switching gears a little bit now, going into regenerative farming. So this is a big thing for Patagonia. So I'd love to know, just to describe a little bit what you're doing around that and why regenerative farming can have an impact on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, it's a new part of our business. And I think for anyone sort of looking at what we're doing over the next couple of months and years, we are going to be talking about regenerative organics a lot more. We feel like it's a possible solution to the climate crisis. And so we're sort of going through this process at the moment of reevaluating how we're growing our clothes and our food for our provisions business as well. And it's starting out with this pilot project where we've built this sort of regenerative organic cotton pilot project. We've partnered with 2 suppliers and over 500 smallholder farms in India. And we've created the first batch of regenerative organic pilot cotton, which is going to be used in our products this year.
Can you just explain what that means?
Yeah. So regenerative organic standards, it's like the next step up from organics, which is the no sprays, no chemical fertilizers. And it basically combines best practice for soil health, animal welfare, and also fair labour rights for farmers, ranchers, and workers. And I think the thing that we're really excited about is this focus on soil health and some of the practices involved in that, because healthier soils sequester more carbon out of the atmosphere, and so that's why we really see it as a potential solution to the climate crisis.
What does it do in that? What does sequestering carbon mean for us novices, and why is that good for the climate?
So it draws carbon out of the atmosphere, and so there's a few different practices. There's a low or no-till, intercropping and cover cropping, and I'm only surface level on this at the moment, so don't ask me many more questions on this. But it's a new approach to how we manage our soil. It retains more moisture as well, and so there's a range of other benefits beyond the sequestering of carbon as well. So
Yeah, cool, fascinating. I imagine the impact could be quite huge if you can get a lot of your, crops to be changed over to this.
yeah, and we're really focusing on it from that food and fibre perspective. And I mean, as much as we sort of grow our clothes, what we say at Patagonia, we also have a food business as well. And so we're going to apply those techniques and standards, hopefully, to our food business.
Maybe, Ben, going over to your farms in Cambodia, how does this relate to regenerative farming, relate to what you're doing with the organic fertilizer that comes out? Is it?
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. It's about putting the organics back into the soil. So if you look at somewhere like Cambodia, about 70% of the soils are classified as degraded. You generally have a pretty poor level of soil health just generally in Cambodia. It's quite sandy. But then just from continual monoculture crop use with heavy chemical fertilizers, particularly over the last 10, 15 years, basically the soil is what they call dead. Like there's no sort of organics in there, there's no microorganisms sort of alive and helping to break down and recycle the soil. You can't retain water, and it doesn't sequester pull much carbon out the air either. So by getting the organics back in, number one, it's cheaper for them, and number two, they increase their crop yield anywhere from 5 to 10% with rice, up to about 30% with vegetables. So it's good for the environment, it's good for the farmer, get much more healthier vegetables and fruit and rice, etc. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Amazing. And the technology is pretty simple, right?
Yeah, you just grab cow poo, throw it in a biodigester, and the bacteria break it down. You get gas like LPG and fertilizer like liquid compost. That's
Awesome.
it.
And what other knock-on effects does this have to communities? When we were there, you were saying that people were then sharing their fertilizer, and there was sending kids to school. And what is the impact of this to them?
Yeah, well, the big one is particularly on women and kids, and the time saved if they were collecting wood before, which is around 80% of households. It takes around 20 hours per week to collect that wood, and that's generally shared between the kids doing the collecting and the chopping, and the mother quite often doing that as well. So that means that they can start their own, like we visit people and they've started their own like sewing businesses, doing like local clothing, or they're growing vegetables that they didn't have time to grow close to the house before, and their kids are able to focus more on going to school or doing other things as well. So it's freeing up that time, because if you've ever been camping and you make a fire once, it's awesome the first time you do it, but if you're doing that 3 times a day, you start getting pretty tired of making that fire.
Yeah.
So.
And outside of Cambodia, how broad is this opportunity to if biodigesters?
Yeah, so globally it's around 205 million households that could have a biodigester in the world. So that's about 1 billion people that could have a biodigester. So that's small-scale farmers globally.
Yeah, right. And you're going to get to all them?
We're trying by 2030, but yeah, a little way to go.
So on biogas as an output of the biodigester, you've also got this bold target by 2025 to be, what is it?
Carbon neutral.
Carbon neutral, yeah. So what does that mean?
So that means to neutralise our carbon emissions across our scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. And so the first part of that strategy is really around measuring our impact. The second is to pursue a sort of broad agenda of emissions reduction initiatives. And then finally to invest in meaningful offsets programs while still pursuing those absolute reductions. And when we measured our emissions a few years ago, we discovered that around 97% of our emissions are in our supply chain, and 86% of those are in the materials that we make. And so for a retail company, that poses some really complex problems, and they're going to require some really complex solutions, I think. But one of the more immediate goals that we've set ourselves that's part of this broader carbon neutral strategy is to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2020. Globally, we're at about 80%, and so we are on track to achieve the 100%. And in Australia, we're exploring a partnership with a community energy retailer to achieve that.
So this year you'll be carbon...
We will be 100% renewable energy.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
And carbon neutral by 2025.
25.
Yeah.
And what is that, the carbon neutral side of it for the retail business here? What sort of things do you need to look at or change from an Australia perspective?
There's a whole range of things that we need to do, from our purchased electricity, addressing our waste as well. I think the emissions reduction initiatives and also the behaviour change is going to be a real focus for our retail business here in Australia. And then globally, well, at least in our headquarters in North America, they're going to be looking more directly at sort of the materials that we're using in all of our products.
When you say behaviour change, do you mean, is that with customers or staff? Or
Customers and staff. Yeah,
right.
So our Warnwear program feeds into this, our recycling streams, all that sort of stuff feeds into it.
So just on the partnership with the energy provider, can you just explain sort of how that's going to play out? What you're doing?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we funded an organisation through our grants program, and they're looking to transition their community in regional Victoria to 100% renewable energy. They've recently set up a community energy retailer as well, and so essentially what we'll be doing is where on-site solar isn't an option for all of our owned and operated sites in Australia, that gap in consumption, we're looking to invest in a solar project in regional Victoria that's going to cover off on our current usage, and then a second project down the line which will cover off on our projected 2025 usage as well.
Yeah, right. So you're not just buying from them, you're actually investing in this partnership? Or
Yeah, we're investing in an installation, and then we're
Wow.
also purchasing renewable energy certificates on top of that to verify that investment.
That's awesome. Sorry, actually one thing I wanted to, before we move on, just quickly on the grants program, can you just explain what that is? You touched on.
Yeah, so Patagonia donates 1% of our sales annually to environmental groups, and we've been doing that since 1985. So far, we've donated more than $100 million around the world. I think something that I'm personally really excited about is the growth in that program here in Australia. When I first started, I think we gave out a grant of $9,000 and I think just this year we've reached just over $500,000 Australian dollars, which is really exciting.
And what sort of organisations or groups are you giving that to?
A whole range. I mean, we're investing in youth activist group, frontline activist groups. So last year we provided some funding to Frontline Action on Coal, who are one of the groups that are working at the Adani blockade, and we literally funded things that they could use to lock on to machinery. We are funding legal challenges. The Sunshine Environment Centre have recently just launched a legal challenge against the local council to try and protect a loggerhead turtle habitat there. We've supported groups down in Tasmania that are trying to protect the Tarkine forest. So there's a really broad range of organisations that we'll support in Australia, but they are primarily in that sort of grassroots community space. We feel that there's sort of this paradigm where there's a lot of really visible organisations at that top end that get a lot of donations, and so we're trying to balance that out a little bit and target the groups that are primarily volunteer-led and don't get a lot of donations and support.
Yeah, it's amazing. Such cool stuff. So just on the energy thing again, Lily, I know you're involved in this solar farm, community solar farm. Can you tell us about that and how you got that came about, got to fruition, and then comparing to behaviour change?
Yeah, sure. So I don't want to take credit for someone else's work. The solar farm was one that got set up in Canberra. It was the first community solar farm in the ACT. Which is fantastic. I was working on it on the side, doing some of their legal stuff while I was working in government. And I guess to Simon's question, one of the things I realised in that project is it took 6 years to get off the ground. The farm took 6 years to get off the ground because of the regulatory barriers to financing, needing to find the feed-in tariff arrangement and having a guarantee on pricing for the electricity. And so it was a very lengthy process, absolutely a worthwhile thing to do, and it provides particularly people who aren't homeowners with a capacity to invest in and benefit financially from renewable energy generation in Australia. So community, clean energy is really important. But I guess what became clear to me when I was running the campaigns at GetUp was just how rapid the impact can be when you're looking at shifts in consumer behaviour. So the Green Power campaign I ran, that was 4,000 people in 4 months switched to green power. It had double the impact of that community solar farm in 4 months, and compared to a 6-year project. So I guess the point there is just that there is a little bit of a prevailing myth around the potential and efficacy of personal changes. That's absolutely true if your unit of analysis is the individual, but as soon as you bring it out to even the scale of a couple of thousand people, it is really significant. So, yeah.
Yeah, I heard someone from Market Forces talking about that, around how they analyse financial institutions in Australia to see where they invest their money. You can check out your bank and see if your money is going to bad things or good things, or not disclosed at all. And he was saying, because it was all pretty heavy, this panel, and he was saying that actually just a few hundred customers switching from a not ethical bank to an ethical bank or to a green loan product got the big bank or the bad bank to be thinking about changing their products and really taking action. So yeah, that was pretty motivating for us to change our banks. But yeah, the power of just small groups can create some momentum. Is inspiring.
There's a new website that's banks are doing carbon reporting on as well. And there's 2 in Australia that do carbon reporting. One is Bank Australia, and I don't know the second one, but I don't know if anyone does. Yeah.
Does anyone know the second one out of the bank? Give them a shout out. Not sure.
No, but shout out to Bank Australia.
And the other, Beyond
they're
Bank,
good
maybe?
guys.
Beyond Bank?
Maybe.
They're pretty progressive on some things. They're a B Corp. Yeah, go Bank Australia. They rock. So you touched on regulation there, which seems dumb that's the sort of thing that's holding this stuff back. I know, Ben, from a Biodigesters perspective, there seems to be opportunity to have this in Australia, but you've mentioned before that regulation is a challenge.
Yeah, basically Australia tends to regulate out, so you can't have household biogas systems in Australia legally. So yeah, basically it's there needs to be a whole review of the Australian standards. So effectively, we've got loads of people who want one of our systems for to use as a composter and then use the gas for the barbie. And they work really well, just kitchen waste. But yeah, technically we can't, or legally we can't sell them in Australia because there's no regulation specific to biogas.
And what needs to change to make that regulation exist?
It's not a huge job. You just there's 2 or 3 Australian standards. They just need to be updated to include a stipulation for biogas. Once that's done, then it's pretty much ready to go.
And is there anyone thinking about that or trying to do that, or?
Because it's not in our remit, I've been given the directive we're more focused on developing countries. I've tried to get a few people onto it, and yeah, if there's anyone who's really passionate about Australian standards that wants to look at biogas, come talk to me.
Anyone? No, maybe someone. Yeah. Please do it.
I keep asking the question. We'll see maybe one day.
Cool. So bringing it all back together again, for each of your organisations to be successful, so you're obviously hoping to make a positive environmental impact. What do you need to do to be successful as a business to make profit and to make a positive impact? What are your key focuses, I guess? Yeah, whoever wants to go first. Lily?
Yeah, sure. So we're launching our flagship app in April. What we're focusing on is sort of getting people to come back to the product, to enjoy it, to get some value out of it, and I guess what you call action rate, so the percentage of actions users take that we suggest to them, and seeing their carbon footprint kind of coming down. And that involves a lot of multivariate testing of different kind of comms and design approaches, with some of that informed through behavioral economics and cognitive science. So it's just all this stuff around we have these psychological barriers to making changes, and it's difficult. And if you present information in certain ways and make it easier for people to take small steps with timely prompts, and they've already got a level of motivation, it's sort of easier for people to make changes. And we've seen that work really well in fitness and health optimization apps. So we're kind of applying some of the same methodologies. So that's what we're focusing on.
And maybe just a follow-up question, Lily. What would be success for you in 2020 at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can learn through that experimentation that for which cohorts of users those different methodologies work best and which sustainability programs, then we'll have some really, really interesting data, that will allow us to scale that product pretty effectively. So it's really proving out a behavioural model.
Right. Ben?
Cool. For us, I think a good bit of advice we got is the best dollar you can raise is from your customers through sales. And as much as, particularly if you're an impact-driven business, you can raise grants, you can raise investment, it's great, but you really got to focus on raising that money from through servicing a customer, providing value, and then them providing you that revenue in return.
And what sort of things are you doing to achieve that, to improve customer value?
Well, we've got this new payment technology which makes it really easy to pay off the system as they're saving. We're looking to get Cambodia to break even into this year, bring in a second product line for non-farmers for clean cooking, and then kick off Bangladesh this year as well.
When will the next country be after Bangladesh?
Yeah, don't ask me that. We'll see. We'll see.
One at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shan?
Our business's mission statement is to save our home planet, which is no mean feat. So, I mean, we have a range of, I guess, measurements of success that for each of our programs that ladder up into that, which makes it a little more digestible, I think. So, you know, at the end of the year, we'll be looking at whether we were able to restore soil health associated with some of the regenerative organic practices that we're implementing at the moment, whether we were able to support this sort of transition to renewable energies through our business investments and recapturing and eliminating waste through our Warnware program. So they're the sorts of measurements of success that will apply to our business.
And are you expecting the business from a retail perspective to grow?
Yeah, as I said, we've seen really positive year-to-year growth over the past few years, and we do see that that will likely continue. And we're looking at a couple of different stores in some new locations as well, which is exciting. It's always a really risky sort of project to open new stores. We've just opened one in the Melbourne CBD, which is going really well. And so I think they've sort of taken that success and will run with it.
Yeah, great. I think it's huge potential. It feels like there is a turn in the tide here where people are more aware of these things and trying to make some positive choices. Maybe just a final point, back to the beginning, the planet's in a bit of a tricky spot. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, feel a bit daunting, feel a bit crap. How do you stay positive and optimistic considering the situation that we're in? Whoever would like to go first? Really? Yeah.
I got really upset with everything that happened over summer with the bushfires. I've lived in Melbourne for a year, but before that was in Canberra for a decade. So I have a lot of friends on the south coast, and thought about it a lot, and kind of realized like I don't have control as an individual over a lot of the stuff that's happening. None of us do, but we can each choose how we want to respond to the situation. You know, we can control our reaction and our response. So my focus this year is really, okay, well, how do I ensure that through the work I do with the Neighbourhood Effect, we can have a positive environmental impact, and also be, I've got skills in advocacy and have a lot of knowledge in this area. So just trying to be more vocal and help people understand what we can do to make meaningful change in this area. That's sort of my response.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. I think likewise. I hope the bushfires, as terrible as they are, were a wake-up call that climate change is not just some remote future thing, but actually it's starting to happen now. So I sensed a shift. I don't know. I live in a bit of a green bubble out in Castlemaine, but hopefully there's a bit of a shift that's happening in society. And I think if we're to take action now of really putting that through, to me, 3 things. Number 1, let's not let politicians forget what just happened and what we need to take action. Number 2, change your bank. And number 3, update your super to either a socially responsible or environmentally responsible number. And those 3 things alone, I think, can make a huge difference, and they're not hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Lily mentioned Project Drawdown, and I mean that's one of the things that keeps me really optimistic and motivated, and it's because we already know all of the solutions we need to address the climate crisis. There's nothing more that we need to invent, and I think it's just about getting everybody moving in the right direction. And hopefully, as devastating as the bushfires were, I would like to think that there's going to be a positive to come out of that, and there's going to be broad sort of community recognition that we need to change quickly.